we've deployed sensors in the real world that capture and understand everything it can see and perceive in its surroundings. We've started with roadways, so are capturing the movement of now millions of vehicles, down to every kind of characteristics of that vehicle, whether it's a UPS truck, what the US Department of Transport number is, if it's a commercial vehicle, what the container ID is, if it's a container, shipping container. So very, very granular data. We capture, every vehicle that goes past in each location. So could be 8 lanes of traffic in 2 directions at 70 miles an hour. And we're capturing everything down to license plate, number of occupants in the vehicle, as well as identifying events on the road, be that collisions, be that erratic driving, et cetera, et cetera.
Greetings all. Today we are joined by Harry Dewhirst with 375 AI. Harry, thanks for coming on today.
How are you doing? Good to see you.
I'm doing great. And I have to say, I've been very much looking forward to this interview. And anyone that's watching, this is one you are not going to want to miss. I'm also rocking my 375 AI shirt today. I have to say, I was just out of the Bitcoin conference, and the quality of this shirt compared to the other ones I got, night and day, man. I love this thing and love what you guys are doing, by the way. They are, when I'm looking at DePIN projects these days, the two things I'm really bullish on is data collection, because I think with the emergence of AI, we're seeing that data is now more valuable than ever. And a lot of people say it's the new oil, if you will. And the other side of things is really the powering of the AI and the GPU aspect. And you guys kind of combine both. And obviously we're going to get into all that. But before we dig into 375 AI, the project itself, Harry, I would love for you to give us your background, because that is equally as impressive.
Sure. Well, again, thanks for having me on, and likewise, been looking forward to this chat. So I'm Harry Dewhirst, co-founder and CEO at 375 AI. I've been an entrepreneur my whole career, pretty much. I started my first business when I was 20, which was in the data analytics space and in mobile data analytics in particular. This was a time that was before iPhone and Android. It was when Nokia and Motorola and Ericsson ruled the world, and ringtones and wallpapers and clip-on cases were the rage. So but that business launched, and during that time iPhone and Android became a reality, and kind of the whole world changed, and people's access to the internet migrated. Now the majority of the internet used is on mobile devices, whereas back then it was closer to 0%. So I had some good successes with that. I sold that business, Amobi, to Singtel, the mobile operator in Singapore. Then went on to be, I lived in Singapore for quite some time, and continued to call it home, and works across the region, India, Southeast Asia, Australia, building out this data business within Singtel Group. Then went on to be president at a location data company called Bliss, which is now owned by T-Mobile in the US. This was a platform that used data captured from mobile apps to understand the movement of people. We raised money from Unilever, the large consumer packaged goods company, who were one of the customers of the business, but our other customers included McDonald's, Walmart, Best Buy, and so on. And these retailers and brands use this information to better understand and target their consumers, which will come to be interesting as we get into kind of what 375 AI is doing to tackle this in a different and I guess using the latest and greatest technology ways. I then had a kind of bit of a departure from my straight entrepreneurial roots. I was appointed CEO of Linksys, the Wi-Fi router company, which was founded when I was 1 year old, and wind forward many years. I was the CEO for several years. It was there that I was brought in to kind of turn around that business. I raised $160 million in funding to take it private. It was owned by Foxconn and listed on the Hong Kong stock market. And successfully did that. And it was really there that me and a colleague who now is co-founder, Rob, at 375, kind of chanced and got fascinated by initially helium and just how networks can be built in a decentralized manner at massive scale with hundreds of thousands of participants, and that whole model just fascinated us to a point where we left to build what has now become 375, and that was just about coming up 3 years ago. So we've kind of been in DePIN before DePIN was even coined. There was DY, there was TPIN, TIPIN, whichever you want to call it. Now there's DPI, but yeah, we've certainly maintained our kind of enthusiasm and excitement about just conceptually what this as a movement means to society.
Love the story, and yeah, I hope we stick with DePIN because otherwise I'm gonna have to change my name. It has certainly evolved over time. And going back to the beginning when you talk about the ringtones on your cell phone, I remember those days, man. It was all about who had the coolest ringtone. But amazing, especially your work with Bliss and having those types of customers and monetizing data. And obviously, there's a lot of overlap with what you're doing now with 375 AI, but you also have the background with DePIN. And I think, more than ever, this is something I always focus on is the team behind the project and having relevant history. And I think, for people watching, there's a lot of people that I think are also DePIN deployers. So I want to dig in a little bit more there. I mean, you weren't just a deployer. You guys were doing it at a pretty large scale. Which projects did you work with?
Sure. So when we originally started the business, we our initial kind of goal or mission was to become the largest deployer of DePIN, or at the time DY stuff, and we set about doing that, and in a large degree achieved it. One of the things that we identified as a kind of broad observation was that deploying isn't just about buying a box and sticking another one in your grandma's attic or on your friend's roof. It's really about where you place them that's going to become of genuine, meaningful usefulness to these networks to enable them to actually drive demand. Another node on a network in the wrong place is net zero gain. And we're certainly seeing that more and more as these projects are evolving into being far more focused on balancing the supply and demand. So one of the early things that we noticed was just that. So the first thing we did was strike an important and exclusive relationship with a business called Outfront Media, which is one of the biggest billboard companies in the world. They're listed on the New York Stock Exchange. They have 50,000 large billboards and hundreds of thousands of smaller screens, bus shelters and things like this across the US. And of course, billboards are in the places that they are for good reason. It's because that's where all the people are. Whether that's on roads, whether that's in Times Square, they're not placed where people aren't, and therefore is incredibly synonymous with where DePIN stuff needs to reside. So we set about deploying helium mobile and helium mobile right at the beginning, along with pollen, which some of you may remember that fizzled out reasonably quickly. Fortunately, we didn't deploy too much of that, and also XNet, whereby we became, one of the largest deployers. During that time, we of course, experimented with every DePIN piece of hardware we could get our hands on. Having been the CEO of a consumer electronics company and manufactured 100+ million routers for people's homes, it was pretty fascinating to look at different people's approaches to the open, out the box experience, and to the setup, and to the ease of use or lack of in many cases. So I've got a pole outside my house that's full of gadgetry. My cars are filled with things, and I, even to this day, I still try and keep on top of everything that comes about, and try and really learn what bits I like, what bits I don't, and apply all of these learnings as much as possible and wherever relevant to what we're building at 375 AI. So that was a really great foundation for us to, get our hands dirty and fully understand the space.
Yeah, no, that makes a ton of sense, and I think it is really important to get your hands dirty. And that, like, my background before being in DePIN, I was a national sales trainer, and I always tried to do ride-alongs with my reps to make sure I was staying up with what was going on in the field. So I think that's super important. Okay, so you had these great spots. You had this, this partnership where you had these billboards with a lot of traffic going past. You built out your networks with Helium, with XNet. At what point did you decide to pivot and kind of do your own thing? And what was the driving factor behind that decision?
So it was about a year and a half ago, maybe a touch more, that we determined that these locations that we have access to are, even though we're deploying this stuff on them, are still incredibly underutilized, underleveraged pieces of real estate, which in many cases, the most advanced technology that exists at these sites is like a light bulb or electricity. So yet they're in these incredibly prime locations to do more interesting stuff. So it was that realization, coupled with, my background, and in part my co-founders Rob and TB, our backgrounds combined lent itself to building a business that is in a sphere that we understand, which was data. And the premise being that online and brands that are doing anything online demand to know absolutely everything. They know what you've clicked, what you've searched, what you've bought, every move you make online. Yet 75% of commerce happens offline and totally out the purview of the business's intelligence. So if we could digitize as much as we can of the real world, then we can have an incredibly powerful data set to help inform decisioning of businesses, enhance the awareness of AI models, which again have all the information they will ever need and more. And there's now, somewhat diminishing returns to capturing much more about the digital sphere, other than certain particular niches. But offline, they again, it's a huge blind spot. And with robotics and autonomy and all this coming down the pipe quicker than we can ever imagine, having the analog world turned into data at scale felt like something that we could do, and we had the team and the experience to do so, and the technology was finally at a point where it was feasible and possible technically to do so.
Yeah, I think we are at this inflection point for a lot of DePIN projects right now, where the timing is right. Right, the hardware costs have come down enough, the AI is advanced enough, and now like DePIN is becoming a real thing that has enough attention to get enough participation. It's all coming together at the right time. So I guess for people that are watching that don't know anything about 375 AI and that background you just gave, what would be your elevator pitch, or how would you describe what you're doing with 375 AI?
Sure. So 375 is a data intelligence network. We've deployed sensors in the real world that capture and understand everything it can see and perceive in its surroundings, uses edge AI, so NVIDIA chips at each of one of these locations to convert everything every input it receives from sensors, from 6 specialized cameras, and convert that into digital data. We've started with roadways, so are capturing the movement of now millions of vehicles, down to every kind of characteristics of that vehicle, whether it's a UPS truck, what the US Department of Transport number is, if it's a commercial vehicle, what the container ID is, if it's a container shipping container. So very, very granular data. We capture every vehicle that goes past in each location. So could be 8 lanes of traffic in 2 directions at 70 miles an hour. And we're capturing everything down to license plate, number of occupants in the vehicle, as well as identifying events on the road, be that collisions, be that erratic driving, et cetera, et cetera. So that's one part of what we do. We also have a mobile app that we launched in testnet called 375 Go, which is the way we see it is it's the smallest sensor on our network. Today, it's capturing passive information as you go about your kind of daily life, be it your location movements, as well as the different RF signals or radio frequency signals that the device is picking up as it goes around, be that Bluetooth, Wi-Fi, and cellular. Those 2 things combined help us create a comprehensive view as to where people and vehicles are moving in the real world, and it's that data that we are selling, and that's what we're building our business out of.
Okay. So
It's a
collecting
long
data,
elevator ride.
collecting data, processing at the edge using AI, monetizing it. Generally, I like to focus on the demand side, but I think, the buying of the data, if you will. But I think in this case, it's really important for people to wrap their head around what you're doing on the data collection side, because it is different than any other data sets that are out there today. Right? So I want to dive in first. The first thing you mentioned was the 375 Edge. Okay, so again, you said that it has different sensors on it. You've got 6 different cameras. I think this does a really good representation of that. So 6 different cameras you're putting right now on these billboards. And then you've got the NVIDIA GPUs that are processing it at the edge. So you mentioned sensors. So what all types of data are you collecting with the edge?
So, I mean, the cameras, I guess, that are the primary sensors, and certainly, the most expensive sensors. There are other sensors built into the device, both antennas for radio frequencies, along with atmospheric, environmental microphones that can be trained to detect collisions, gunshots. So there's a few other things in there, but the camera is really the primary source of information, and they're run through this computer vision object detection model, which is locally hosted. We train that model, and we believe that we have one of the most comprehensive identification models of vehicular traffic.
Okay. And so this is your flagship hardware, obviously. I mean, having NVIDIA GPUs built in, that's not cheap. So I believe you have about 50 of these out there so far. They're currently at a price tag of about $50,000. Is that correct?
That's right. Yeah, we pre-sold the first batch of 50 of the edge devices towards the tail end of last year. Yes, the device is a very valuable piece of equipment, and to do what it does requires one, specialized expensive cameras, two, this GPU at the edge to be able to be capable enough of running its own model to do everything that it wants to do locally. So it's definitely on the higher end of a DePIN project's price point, but for very good reason, because the data fidelity that we can get out of it is like nothing else that's really out there.
Sure. Yeah, and obviously I think that's where the Outfront Media partnership is so important, because when you have hardware that valuable, you want to make sure it's in a high value area. So matching supply and demand, you mentioned that earlier. We're seeing more and more projects do that. I think that is absolutely brilliant. Now, obviously, you have plenty of demand for it, because I believe I heard you in an interview talking about how you had one entity reach out that wanted to buy all 50 of them, and you limited it to make sure it stayed decentralized. Do you guys have plans to decentralize it further? Because while there are people that could buy all 50, there are also a lot of people out there that $50,000 price tag is pretty high. So do you have plans to make it more accessible, kind of lower that barrier to entry for people in the future?
Absolutely. There's a couple of ways in which we're doing that. I mean, one, anyone and everyone can participate with 375 through the 375 Go app. There are 200,000 plus people using this in testnet and growing all the time, and we've been overwhelmed by the reception to that. So that's kind of the easiest and free way to get involved with the project. The next round of devices, of 375 Edge devices that we sell, will be fractionalized. So anyone with $100 could buy a piece of one of these devices and receive the allocated rewards for that slice. Or they could buy a whole one, or they could buy 100 units of $100, whichever they please. But that means that really we can, as you say, give ourselves exposure to an audience that want to be involved in kind of owning part of the network, owning part of the hardware, but don't necessarily have or want to deploy $50,000 into a single piece of gear. The last way, and this is a product that we've been developing and is now ready to go into that kind of more final stage of production, is 375 Street, which is think of it as a miniaturized version of 375 Edge. It has NVIDIA GPU built into the unit, albeit much smaller. And of course, you will have seen Jensen's announcements about all these different chips that are coming out, and they're certainly getting smaller and smaller in size and more and more capable at a lower and lower cost. So we're leveraging some of these innovations to skinny down the kind of device that can sense the same things. It can be deployed by anyone. It's an all-in-one plug and play product. It has 2 cameras instead of 6. It's an all-in-one unit, as I said, and it will capture the same types of information and normalize it into the same format of that of Edge, but is more designed for urban, suburban, and rural environments where it's not 8 lanes of traffic at 70 miles an hour. It could be a high street. It could be a car park. It could be a gas station. It could be out the front of a cafe. and this is both pedestrian and vehicular. So it could be in a totally pedestrianized area and still capture really valuable and important information.
That's fantastic. Obviously there's still a GPU, so it's still processing at the edge, not like the the high end model, obviously, but I think it's going to be critical for you guys to get full coverage, right? Because a $50,000 piece of hardware that's going to be really useful in those areas with high traffic, like you said. But some of those outlying areas, I think the street version is going to get you the extra coverage you need. And I think overall, it's really smart what you guys are doing here because you're addressing all the types of participation. You have some people that maybe don't want to invest anything. Well, you can download the app for free and start participating and earning for free. You have this street view or the street model rather, because you have those people that are like, well, they're very hands-on. I want to be able to deploy the hardware myself. And you're coming in at, I believe, so a $1,200 price point. Is that correct? Somewhere around there.
Yeah, around there.
Okay. So you're addressing that type of participant as well, because there's a lot of those people in DePIN that they want to be able to be hands-on, so they can go ahead and deploy. And then you also have with the edge, the people that don't want to be hands-on, they want to invest, and that gives them an avenue to do so. So I think you're knocking out all three types of participation, which I think is really smart, and all of those are bringing value to the network at the same time.
Yeah, and you're absolutely right to make the point about the 375 street fills in the gaps between the 375 edge. So to give some data around that, so we've deployed 20 devices in the Los Angeles, LA County area, and as I say, we're capturing the movement of millions of vehicles per day. There's only in LA County somewhere between 5 and 6 million unique vehicles on the road in any given day. So we're capturing, 20% plus of the unique vehicles on the road in any given day, just from those 20 deployments. So whilst it can give us huge reach, there's of course that's really focused on the highways and intersections and arteries of the city, which you can strategically choose and tend to be where these billboards are. But there's a huge amount of data still to be captured, in the more urban areas, and then as you go between cities, in suburban and rural areas, there's also blind spots that it wouldn't make sense to deploy a 375 edge device there. But it definitely makes sense to deploy a street. So with a few thousand 375 edge devices across the United States, and tens, if not hundreds of thousands of street devices, that certainly could be sustained and useful. It wouldn't make sense to have tens of thousands of edge devices. There would just be diminishing returns at a certain point, because you wouldn't capture much net new data. Whereas with 375 street, there is a lot of net new data on every corner.
It makes a ton of sense. And I think, again, I think it's going to build out the networks to get the full coverage, also allow anyone to participate. I think it's really brilliant. One other thing I wanted to talk about on the data collection side before we move into the demand side, because the demand side, as I always stress, is as important as anything. I will tell you, there's plenty of demand for this network. But you recently announced a partnership with AYDO. And in particular, I highlighted this area on here in the first phase of your testnet integration. You're looking to onboard 40 select IoT devices, in this case, cameras, as nodes on your network. And it's going to further optimize your models and maximize data insights. Now, one thing I want to bring up, and I'll have you speak to this. You also posted this recently. Junk in, junk out. Your data is only as good as the data that's ingested, right? The outputs are only as good as the inputs. So with this, bringing on a third-party entity like AYDO, what type of value do you think that adds to the network? And what are you doing to ensure that data that you're collecting and adding to the network is high quality?
Yeah, really, really good question. So this is part of a broader product strategy that we're calling 375X, which is effectively the ingestion of video streams from third-party sources. So we have the data that's being captured and processed at the edge as our kind of proprietary data, where we have full control of the data and how it's processed. This is basically bring your own device. So if you have a fleet of cameras, you could monetize that data, monetize those cameras by us extracting information and data from it. To your point, yes, of course, by having exposure to third parties where we're not in total control of the data that's captured and the stream that's being seen, it is open and susceptible to abuse or manipulation. Now this particular, this partnership now is a very kind of closed beta. Those 40 cameras that are referenced here are being ingested today and live. So we can, at that scale, we can be quite confident with the feeds that are coming in. When you scale that to many thousands, it would be more challenging. Now, that being said, AI exists for a reason, and we do have a very robust source of truth in our own data sets. So anything that would be to contradict those sources of truth based on the data that we're capturing, either from Go, Edge, or Street, enable us to really benchmark that of any third-party data we receive. And ultimately, the model will move and the tokenomics will move to a reward mechanic that's highly correlated, if not totally correlated, to the downstream demand. So if you put junk in or garbage in to the platform, you won't receive rewards, and therefore the incentive to do so is minimized, if not removed.
Okay, so it'll take care of itself in a way, and I agree. I mean, we're at this point now where with AI, you can make really large data sets actionable, whereas in the past, maybe that would be a little bit overwhelming to have too much data. You can also identify outlier or what you consider bad data a lot easier with AI. So look, I think, I mean, you said it yourself, junk in, junk out. You're very focused on making the data actionable, making sure it's high quality data. And with that in mind, if you can add more data, well, more data, the better, as long as it is, you have quality controls in place. And that does bring me to the demand side of the equation, because you have all this data. You have the edge, the high, flagship model. You have the street to fill in the gaps. You are now, with this AYDO partnership, bringing in even more data. So I want to kind of break this down into two different categories: the visual data from the device I just talked about, and then after that, we'll get into the mobile app data. But starting with the visual, what type of data are you collecting and focusing on, and who is the buyer of that data?
Sure. So having been, in the data business for most of my career before getting into the Wi-Fi business, and now this, the way data is traded, there are multiple platforms at which you can insert your unique data set into, and there are dozens and dozens of these platforms, everything from companies you've heard of like Google and Oracle to companies you've never heard of, and they all have various different specialties and niches, but they're always on the hunt for new and unique data sets that can provide a more deterministic route to the information versus that of extrapolation and proxies, which is tended to be how many data decisions and data sets are born and built. So we've been busy integrating and forming partnerships with these data marketplaces and exchanges to ingest our data into the platform, and the buyers that have kind of stood out from those discussions, and we've already signed some contracts to sell the data. This is even ahead of our TGE. I've kind of fallen into a few categories: transport and logistics, which is I guess, kind of an obvious one given the type of information we're capturing. And public safety is, of course, a large area where there is interest for the well-being and betterment of society. In financial services, whether that's hedge funds and traders looking to ingest data sets that give them an edge when it comes to understanding economic and business performance. Insurance companies is another area. And then I guess the other large category is AI generally, whether that's AI models ingesting bespoke proprietary data, which each of the large AI companies have all got their own different flavor as to what their proprietary thing is, whether it's XAIs with their X kind of proprietary data, whether it's OpenAI's with Reddit's live feeds. They're going to be buying and consuming proprietary information, which will make that, I think, in my personal view, is the thing that will differentiate one model from another and might make you use one model or another. Or the customers themselves can choose to have unique proprietary data, whether it's their own first party or anything they buy from a company like us, to make those models smarter and more aware for their businesses to thrive. And lastly, in that kind of category of AI, there's then, of course, robotics, autonomous vehicles, which, of course, the more they can understand as to what's going on in the real world beyond the purview of their own sensors in their own bubble, the better.
For sure. And being able to process the data at the edge and make it actionable in real time, really, I think is going to be huge. Kind of breaking down that a little bit, like the public sector you mentioned, I guess that would be good for like Amber Alerts if you're looking for certain license plates, etc. And I think hedge funds, they're always looking for any data that can give them an edge, like you said. And you guys are going to have a data set that just hasn't existed. What other data exists that's even similar? I mean, you guys are pretty differentiated.
Yeah, I mean, hedge funds, for example, they've been using and have been for quite some time, like satellite imagery of parking lots of Walmart versus Best Buy versus Target versus Costco, and they've been able to, and this kind of pace of change is only going to get greater and greater with AI, because you can it's hungry. You can feed it more and more and more, and it will learn more and more and more. So it's no longer a quant's kind of job to figure out these correlations, because it's being done by a machine. So they've been ingesting that kind of data. Ours puts a far finer tune on that. For example, it's far cheaper. Satellite imagery is not cheap. And it can only take place every now and again when it happens to be flying over. So there's a persistency both in the real-time nature, but also with every passing day, we're storing this data forever. And therefore, history says if you can understand the past, you're better able to predict the future. And in 5 years' time, we'll have 5 years worth of data. 10 years' time, we'll have 10 years worth of data. So there are use cases that will evolve and become apparent that aren't necessarily available today until we have that real historical collection. But in the meantime, the real-time information, and even just looking last week, last month, is still monetizable, and the reception we've received from potential customers and customers who are signing up has been amazing.
It's truly fascinating. I mean, to think about how minute you can get on this data, from obviously the type of vehicle that's being driven. I mean, like if you know there's a bunch of people that have Teslas in this area versus gigantic trucks, you have different demographics that you can market to, in the number of people in the vehicle. If you have commercial vehicles, I mean, there are, to your point, there's gonna be so many emerging use cases with this data. What do you think out of all the things you've talked about so far on the visual side of things? Like, what is the biggest, I guess, opportunity today, would you say, as far as like total addressable market and revenue?
I think the immediate term revenues that we're driving into the network, which of course, as having been a deployer of other people's DePIN stuff, one of the frustrations or pain points has been build loads of supply, demand too slow to come online. So that's something that we learned from the industry at large and have built 375 in mind of not falling down that kind of trap. And therefore we're looking to quite deliberately grow our demand in line with that of our supply. So the short term and immediate revenue cases will come from traditional Web 2 businesses, large Fortune 500 companies, retailers, brands who need this information and can use this information to help better understand their offline commerce. And that's a business where I've in the past sold hundreds of millions of dollars of that data to these kinds of customers, and that market exists. Beyond that, as you start to move into these areas of public safety, of AI, of robotics, of LLMs, that's a whole other growing and nascent side of the business that could dwarf that of what I've previously described there, and will certainly come as we develop greater and greater scale. So short term, we have very clear go-to-market strategy and product market fit with existing Web 2 businesses, but we believe there's just ginormous and frankly unknown or unimaginable, because it hasn't yet been imagined, kind of upside on where the world goes, and the future is interesting, to put it lightly.
I would say so. So anyone watching, that should be music to your ears. Okay, revenue before TGE. So number one, number two, the more data they feed these models, the more historical data they have, the more valuable it's going to get. So we are just scratching the surface. So the fact that you're already getting contracts, already getting revenue, some of that obviously you have overlap with your prior work history and working with some of these large brands and monetizing data in the past, so you know what you're doing. I think it's all coming together at the perfect time. So I want to touch on the Go app because that's a different data set altogether. What are the opportunities there? And then also want to talk about the regions that you're really focused on. But let's touch on the Go app first.
Sure. So 375 Go is available in the Apple and Android app stores. We launched it in November, December last year. You connect it to your Solana DevNet wallet, and receive testnet tokens for your participation. We've, as I say, been overwhelmed by the response to it. We've got over 200,000 devices capturing information already, and growing all the time. The information today that's being captured is done passively, so you can kind of set and forget and go about your daily life, and you capture rewards the more kind of movement you make, and therefore the more data that is captured in the background from both RF location and speed tests. You are able to control like the frequency at which it's doing these tests in the background to preserve battery life and data consumption. So there is that control for the user, and that data is already valuable to ISPs and mobile operators who buy speed test data from businesses like speedtest.net, which is owned by a company called Ookla. Their business model is selling speed test information. We have a real-time speed test army of people, 200,000 people around the world who are contributing that today. we intend, as the app develops, and this is in the works, to add more and more functionality for people to contribute more and more data, both passively and actively. So if a customer of ours is looking for particular content, whether that's photos of things or whether they're looking to measure something that the phone has the capability to do so, we can push that out to our community of people, of users, to go and capture that, in real time. So expect to see more and more developments whereby our community can generate greater rewards by more actively participating. And these active participations will, in most cases, result in like immediate buy and burn, because these things are effectively sponsored. These actions are sponsored, and those revenues will go towards appreciating the token, or diminishing the supply of this token to diminish it. So more to come on that, and we're very excited about that community. And as I say, it's all over the world. There isn't a country really that doesn't have some element of coverage.
Okay, yeah. So, by the way, if you're watching, like, download the app, guys. Like, there's no reason not to be contributing to this project right now. It's free. One of the questions I got from the community has to do with the regions that you're focused on, because they were just over in Asia, and they were using the app, and they were curious, and it kind of made me think about this too. What regions are you focused on? I imagine on the imagery side of things, you're probably focused in different regions, maybe a wider array of regions for the mobile app.
So the for 375 Edge, it's been exclusively focused on the US to begin with. That being said, we are working on some partnerships that I hope to be able to announce soon enough to bring 375 Edge to other countries, through some partnerships. So watch this space. 375 Street we will definitely make available to more than just the US, but that's still in the works as to the exact geographies. 375 Go we made available to global audience from day one, and it was really kind of fascinating to see which geographies and which countries gained the greatest traction, and it will be that will definitely be operating as a kind of global element, and we'll be looking at forming partnerships to monetize and work with the communities in Indonesia, in India, in Philippines, China, Japan. So we're definitely excited about the fact that that's so global from day one, and we believe that we can grow that audience of people to many millions, that can participate and be rewarded for doing things that are of relatively low effort.
Yeah, absolutely. So that answers that question. So thank you to the community member that submitted that. So you collaborated with AYDO. Do you have any plans to collaborate with more DePIN projects in the future?
Yes, we've having been deployers, we've built great relationships with many of the other DePIN projects. We would like to be able to host some of these devices in the same location as our 375 Edge. Potentially, we could even bundle the 375 Street with other DePIN stuff, because they're going to really be synonymous to one another in terms of where they would be placed. So why not place 2 or 3 or 4 things there that can all be complementary to one another, and increase the yield from one power plug and one internet connection. So yes, we're absolutely exploring how we can expose the unique and valuable real estate that we have to others. And because our device has such great compute capability, there's really no reason why each DePIN project necessarily needs to have 10 Raspberry Pis for 10 projects when you have a supercomputer that could run 100,000 Raspberry Pis simultaneously as a container. So, longer term, we could look to see how we can integrate people's software and sensor into the box itself to service multiple DePIN projects from a single piece of hardware, which we're beginning to see. Wingbits and GeoNet have launched a device that does both, and I think that's a really, really good sign of things to come.
For sure. I think we're going to see more and more collaboration. So that will be super exciting. And speaking of yield, okay, so you mentioned this earlier. You're going to have revenue already coming into the project. As far as the tokenomics go, I believe you're launching on Solana. Is that correct? Okay. So token burns. And obviously, I don't know that the full tokenomics are fully released yet, but I'm sure you guys have put a lot of thought into that based on your learnings from other projects. What are you guys doing to drive utility to the token, and what do the token burns look like as it relates to revenue?
Sure. So 42.5% of the total token supply will be released to the community over an 8-year period. And 80% of the revenue is collected by monetizing the data, be it from Edge, Street, Go, or 375X, will be passed to the foundation, go out and buy tokens in the market and burn. So very similar to many of the other models. The difference being is that the burn is starting the moment the tokens start to distribute, as opposed to coming, months, if not years later, where supply is already, been distributed for a very, very long time. So the burn has a long way to catch up. So whilst there isn't going to be, sufficient burn to counteract the emissions of supply on day one, just by there being some and a growing amount, quarter over quarter, month over month, is really where we were laser focused to ensure that we had from launch.
Yeah, that to me, that is a massive green flag because you see projects that they're really focused on selling hardware. In some cases, focus on their token launch, and the demand may or may not come later, right? So I think having demand immediately, that is a huge green flag. And the fact that you guys haven't had your TGE and you're already building up demand is a massively good sign. So TGE, do you have an expected time frame that you can speak to?
TGE will take place in Q3, and we will have communications coming out to community on that soon. And part of the benefit of the longer time goes by, the more revenue deals we're striking, and the greater buy and burn there will be when the token launches. So from our perspective, that's going to be a good thing for the community as a whole, and yeah, something that all of our efforts are going into.
For sure. So I think you said, what is it, 50 edge devices deployed at this point?
Correct. Yeah.
So what are your growth goals? We'll talk about the deployment side first, as far as the edge, getting the street out there, towards, let's say this year and then looking forward.
So we'll look to sell several hundred more edge nodes over the coming 6 to 9 months, and roll them out over the next 6 to 12 months. We'll be pre-selling the 375 Street in batches of hundreds, if not thousands, and that will happen most likely in Q3 with delivery in Q4. So that's really the kind of major kind of highlights of milestones that people can expect, alongside obviously TGE.
Okay, that's great. By the way, guys, I will be doing a video on the street. Maybe I can get my hands on one and do an unboxing and review and setup video and everything. Okay, so revenue goals. Okay, and I know it can probably be hard to answer because you guys are really like developing your own new sector. But what do revenue goals look like? What do you think is reasonable to generate this year? And then looking forward, what type of growth do you think you might be able to see?
Sure. So, I mean, our revenues are being structured in a kind of recurring manner. So data as a service, like a SaaS model. So we will end this year with hundreds of thousands of dollars of annualized revenue, and we'll end next year with millions of dollars of annualized revenue. That I am of utmost confidence in. It could be, tens of millions, who knows? But that's certainly the goal.
I could definitely see you guys coming through. I think you might be being a little bit conservative, given your history and the fact that, again, as you get more coverage, as you get more historical data, as you feed your models more, that data is only going to become more and more valuable. For people that want to learn more about the project, where would you recommend they look? Obviously, we showed your website quite a bit in this interview, but what other resources are there for people?
Sure. So yeah, 375.ai is the website. We're on X, which is 375 AI underscore. You can find us on Discord. We've got a very active and engaged community there. So thank you for everyone who is already in Discord, and thank you for the 90,000 people who are following us on X and are super engaged. So I appreciate each and every one of you, and please come join the fun.
Join the fun, download the app. When they open up the wait list, get on the street for sure. Get your pre-orders in. Is there anything before we cut off here, Harry, that you want to state? Any closing thoughts that you have?
No, next version of the t-shirt. First one's coming to you.
Let's go. The hats are nice too. I like the hat a lot. Didn't rock it today, but I will be rocking it later this week as I'm on vacation. Harry, I appreciate you coming on today. Super excited about what you guys are doing, and looking forward to all the future developments that are coming.
Awesome. Thanks so much. Pleasure to chat.
All right. Take care.